Cinema is filled with lovable, sympathetic heroes who everyone wanted to win, like Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Atticus Finch, and then there's the other side of the coin. The unlikable, unsympathetic protagonists, the ones you wanted to lose. Year in, year out, many films get criticised for the characters being unlikable, but is an unsympathetic protagonist always a bad thing? I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 movie protagonists you're desperate to see lose. Number 10. Norman from Don't Breathe 2. Occasionally, sequels will turn former villains into the hero. Sometimes this works out well, like in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and sometimes it works out horribly. Such was the case with Don't Breathe 2. In 2016's excellent Don't Breathe, blind Gulf War veteran Norman, who was terrifically played by Avatar's Stephen Lang, was a ferocious and terrifying killer who made for one of the finest horror movie villains of the past decade. The delayed 2021 sequel, on the other hand, took his character in a woefully misjudged direction. This time around, he's a morally ambiguous protagonist trying to protect his adopted daughter from a criminal gang. Essentially, this movie will probably only work for those who haven't seen the first film. Otherwise, it is near on impossible to root for the deranged thug who raped and murdered his way through Don't Breathe, especially as the sequel doesn't bother to acknowledge Norman's violent past, aside from a brief throwaway line during the final act. In many other departments, Don't Breathe 2 is just fine. It's a well-directed revenge thriller with some punchy outbreaks of violence. More than anything else, this particular case is an example of how just one misjudged creative choice can sink an entire film. Number 9. Susan in Deep Blue Sea. Deep Blue Sea is a well-executed B-movie in many ways, and it's one of the only shark movies not named Jaws that is worth seeing, but the film does have its issues. Its protagonist, Dr. Susan McAllister, played by Saffron Burrows, is one of the biggest ones, and this was recognised before the film was even released. During test screenings, those first viewers were absolutely unanimous in their dislike of McAllister, a scientist who is trying to cure Alzheimer's. She has conducted a series of dangerous experiments on some sharks. As a result, they become unusually intelligent and incredibly deadly, and she prevents the others from killing the sharks more than once so that she can protect her research. Those audiences were infuriated by the original ending, in which Susan survived, while the far more lovable film-stealing comic relief character Sherman, played by LL Cool J, died. As such, the ending was reshot, with Susan dying in the climax and Sherman surviving in her place. Test audiences do frequently hold far too much sway in Hollywood, but they were bang on the money here. Number 8. Annie in Dashcam. Dashcam is a found footage horror from host-director Rob Savage, a very interesting case as far as unlikable protagonists are concerned. The lead role is played by American musician and vlogger Annie Hardy, performing as a fictionalized version of herself, a snarky, ignorant, and staggeringly unlikable right-wing conspiracy theorist. The story unfolds through her cameras. Through Dashcam, it feels like Rob Savage is testing the audience, asking them how much of Annie they can take, and if they're still prepared to root for such a repulsive character. Well, those who were rooting for Annie to die will be disappointed, as she does indeed survive the film. Having a lead character so hard to root for certainly is a subversion of tropes, alright, but not one that necessarily worked. The film was divisive, with many finding the film almost unwatchable thanks to Annie. Dashcam is actually a frightening and skillfully made horror film in most other ways, so it's worth seeing if this questionable creative choice can be overlooked. Number 7. Evan Hansen in Dear Evan Hansen. Evan Hansen, played by Ben Platt, is another supposed good guy who seems like a bit of a psychopath more than anything else. After a fellow student named Connor tragically takes their own life, Connor's family, through a misunderstanding, believes that Connor and Evan were close friends, and instead of setting the record straight, Evan goes along with it. In order to get close to the family, especially Connor's sister, who he has a crush on, and become popular, he doubles down and fakes an entire friendship. As it should go without saying, even when taking Ben Platt's ridiculous performance, complete with a ghastly makeup job to make Platt look young enough to be a high schooler, out of the equation, Hansen is a deeply uncomfortable character to watch. He's not likeable in the slightest really, and to make matters worse, he gets off far too easily once his lies are finally exposed. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too. Number 6. Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood. Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, is one of the greatest cinematic creations of the 21st century. A richly drawn, practically Shakespearean anti-hero flawlessly brought to life by Daniel Day-Lewis, who gives one of the great film performances in the role. Plainview is also undeniably one of the most unlikable film protagonists of all time. A cruel, hate-filled and selfish psychopath driven entirely by his unending lust for money and power, Plainview is perhaps cinema's most potent and terrifying representation of capitalism run amok. A corrupt businessman, a bully, and a cold-blooded murderer who brutally kills two other characters throughout the story, Plainview is an extremely unsettling character to watch. He does have redeeming qualities, however, such as his love for his family and, at times, his ambition and relentless drive to invoke a certain grudging respect, but that's about it as far as likability is concerned. Number 5, all of them unfriended. Horror cinema is full of unlikable characters, and that isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes the main characters being so repulsive makes the story more interesting and helps it to function as a powerful cautionary tale. Such is the case with the much underrated screen life horror film Unfriended. Unfriended tells the story of 6 American high schoolers who were stalked by the ghost of a teenager who took their own life thanks to cyberbullying. The ghost, Laura, knew all of them and was good friends with the protagonist Blair. She holds them responsible for her death, and as it turns out, this isn't without reason. These characters immediately seem tiresome, but as the ghost picks them off, she reveals many of their worst secrets, and it gradually becomes clear that they are indeed scum of the earth. They're all exposed as liars, bullies, backstabbers, and cheaters. Hell, it even turns out one of the male characters drugged and raped a fellow student. Eventually, it's revealed that Blair, Laura's supposed friend, was the one who uploaded the humiliating video that led to Laura committing suicide, and shortly before this reveal, Blair allowed Laura to kill her boyfriend just to protect this secret. The characters in Unfriended being so unlikable isn't a negative. It allows the film to be an unsettling and thought-provoking look at the dark side of social media and teen culture too. Still, it's pretty much impossible not to root for the ghost in this case. At least they all die in the end though. Number 4, Jack in The House That Jack Built. Cinema is full of serial killers, but few are as messed up as Jack, played by Matt Dillon from Lars von Trier's controversial and sadistically nasty The House That Jack Built. The House That Jack Built, an interesting and well-written albeit excessive horror movie, shows Jack's grisly murders in horrifying detail and even goes deep into Jack's psychology. Through his conversations with Virgil, played by Bruno Ganz in one of his final film roles, he reveals his deranged psyche as he presents his justification for his many crimes. Dillon's excellent performance brings out just how broken and alone Jack really is, and as such, it's possible to feel a teeny tiny bit of sympathy for him, but only a tiny bit. The director's never been one to focus on audience comfort or satisfaction, but in this case, he did give the audience a lovely moment of catharsis by concluding the film with Jack literally falling into hell. Number 3, Lou Bloom in Nightcrawler. Bloom, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, stands as one of the most hateful, insidiously vile protagonists of the 2010s. He's an amateur journalist who sells his illegally obtained crime scene footage to the highest bidder, all while destroying or even killing anyone who gets in his way. Many films have satirized the corrupt practices of the mass media, but few have done so with such terrifying ferocity as Nightcrawler, and this chilling character is the main tool the film uses to hammer home its tragically relevant message. Unlike with some other cases on this list, Bloom being so hateful isn't a negative at all. Quite the contrary, actually. It makes him even more fascinating. Nevertheless, he is impossible to root for in many ways. Still, at least he gets caught in the end, right? No such luck. He gets away with everything and even hires a new team to expand his business. Chilling stuff, honestly. Number 2, Lou Ford in The Killer Inside Me. Another Lou now, and this one is arguably even worse than the last, and that is saying something. In The Killer Inside Me, Lou Ford, played by Casey Affleck, who gives a stronger performance than the movie deserved, is a deputy sheriff in Texas who is secretly the stuff that nightmares are made of. He's a ferocious and sadistic serial killer who commits many harrowing acts of violence throughout this 2010 crime film, which is a sickening work that you'll probably wish you never watched. In particular, the scene in which he batters Joyce, played by Jessica Alba, to a pulp ranks among the nastiest scenes of the 2010s. Still, at least she survives. Most of the others that Ford encounters throughout the film, including his own fiancée, aren't so lucky. He's also, in flashback, shown assaulting a little girl as a teenager, so this guy is basically the lowest of the lows, the essence of heartless evil. Some serial killer movies do manage to create a little bit of sympathy for their characters by emphasising just how broken and lost they are, but there's none of that with The Killer Inside Me. This is a film that suffers from its disinterest in its characters, and Ford is simply a very uncomfortable character to watch. He does die at the end, although the satisfaction of an on-screen and brutal death, which he gave most of his victims, is denied in this case. And number 1, Bella Swan in the Twilight Saga. So finally, if there's one movie protagonist everyone wanted to see fail, or to be frank, bite the dust, it's the Twilight Saga's Bella Swan. This character is perhaps the queen of unlikable protagonists, but why is she quite so dreadful? Let's start with the way she treats her school friends, and her genuinely likeable father like trash. She's emotionally manipulative, she's shallow, rude, and as a person, Bella is quite off-putting in almost every sense. Secondly, she is a very poorly written character. She's such an inactive, passive lead who's defined entirely by her relationship with Edward Cullen, played by Robert Pattinson. And finally, there's the matter of the performance. As Kristen Stewart has shown time and time again since leaving the role, she's actually a really great actress, but she was quite bad in these movies and gave one of the most annoying film performances of the century. In more recent years, it's become apparent that, much like co-star Robert Pattinson, she didn't actually like the films and, accordingly, phoned it in.